Gear 5th Luffy is in front of 5 monsters. These are Luffy's words, not my words. He's in front of 5 monsters, and we see the names of these mythical Zoans. We see an ox demon, of course, that is Saturn. We see an Utsumade, this mythical zone bird, and it makes sense because that Gorosei with the mustache and the tall Gorosei and the skinny build, he does look like a mythical zone bird. So Oda, it does make sense. I know it's hard to comprehend what I'm saying, but it does make sense. Then of course we have Mars. Well, of course Mars. Oh, actually, yeah, that is Mars. And then we have Hoki, who's Mercury. Now we didn't really see him do much this chapter, but I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later. But this Gorosei, I've always thought he was a prominent Gorosei member. I've always felt like that. And how to say this, the fact that he didn't do much this chapter is interesting. Now, I do want to say there's also the Skeleton Horse, who did a lot this chapter. Nusjuro, who everyone thinks is from Wano. And of course, is a swordsman. He did a lot this chapter. And we see his mythical zone. And then, of course, we see the Sandworm, who a lot of people thought this Gorosei member, Jupiter, who people thought related to Sanji with the blonde hair, and looks like the youngest Gorosei. This Sandworm, yeah, his mythical zone is probably the weakest in design. I will say this: you're literally a worm. Like, that's what people make fun of people. You worm. I could already see someone finding this character and calling him a worm. So I gotta say that real quick. But it was an amazing spread with Luffy looking at the Gorosei actual designs. Unlike Sabo, who's looking at the silhouettes, but Sabo did have Imu there as well, so it's completely different. And we probably get that reveal of Sabo actually looking at the Gorosei members in a flashback. It will be cool. Now I do want to say this. Let's discuss the power scaling. And I know a lot of people are like, how can you power scale the Gorosei when we've seen nothing so far? Well, I'll tell you guys this, guys. In this chapter, there was a couple of, not like crazy hints, but things people can look at and deep it and make it something bigger than it actually was. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how Oda actually ordered the Gorosei. He started with Saturn at number 5, went to 4 when it comes to Mars, I believe, then went to Mercury, Nusjuro, and then of course I think it was Sandworm. Now I don't think that's the power scaling, honestly, because I don't think Sandworm is the strongest, or Jupiter, I don't think he's the strongest Gorosei. So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna respect that whole power scaling, how people are looking at it. Now I do want to say this: Lucci did say that to lose to Zoro in this chapter, don't you want to check out where that insane haki is coming from? And Zoro says it's the middle of the island. Now, that just shows that the Gorosei are crazy haki users. Because a lot of people thought they were just using hacks, like Saturn being able to recover, Saturn being able to one-shot people. People thought they were just using hacks. But now with Lucci confirming that these guys have immense haki, and we always thought that when everyone was reacting, like Kizaru, Jinbei, Lucci, Zoro, and Luffy all reacted to when Saturn initially arrived. But now Lucci saying it himself just shows that these Gorosei members are not weak. A lot of people think the Goroseis are carried by their delve roots. Now this confirmed that they're monster haki users. And we should all knew this when Saturn was literally taking hits from Luffy and coming back. Yes, he recovered, but he still is coming back and attacking guys. So we should all knew this. And I will say this, a lot of people look at the whole Kuma punch and they deep that and everything like there, or Sanji blocking Saturn's attack. I'm telling you guys right now, these Goroseis are no joke. They're literally protecting Imu. And the fact that they all pulled up, they are not playing around in this Egghead Island incident. I have to keep it real, guys. Now, I will say this. There is a lot of people looking at the whole, if you want a power scale, look at how they're actually set up. It was Saturn in the middle, Nusjuro's on the left, Mercury on the right, and then of course we have on the sides, we have Mars and Jupiter. Now I've always felt like this is more of a natural power scheme for the Gorosei. I thought Nusjuro, Saturn, and Mercury, I thought these three were probably, is going to be one of these three as the strongest Gorosei. And last year I made a whole video on how I believe Saturn could be the strongest. People were like, how do you think Saturn is the strongest? He was the first one revealed. It's just something about how Saturn pulled up to Egghead Island. It made me think he was the strongest. And the fact that he summoned all the other Gorosei to this moment, like honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Saturn is the strongest. Now, that is my opinion so far of what we've seen. What do I think about Luffy going against this Gorosei? Well, we thought it was going to be Luffy versus Gorosei, but it wasn't. Every Gorosei was doing something different in this chapter. We've seen it. And so Will we see Luffy versus all the Gorosei? Probably not. Honestly, that doesn't make sense for all these powerful characters. 5 immense powerful characters to go up against Luffy. Yes, Luffy is Gear 5th, Joy Boy, Awaken, incredibly powerful. And you have to understand, people are forgetting Kizaru is still awake, yo. Kizaru is still looming there. So there's 6 monumental, powerful characters after chapter 1110. There's 6 monumental, powerful characters that are ops to, of course, the main characters in the Straw Hat Pirates. So is Zoro, Sanji, Jinbei, like, is that enough? Will we need Kizaru to become on our side? Like, there's so many questions. The Giants are even here. Like, we had appearances from the Blackbeard Pirates and Von Arger and Katarina and Devon, and then they left. Now, truly, if I'm being completely real, I do think there's going to be another person coming. I know the whole Monkey D. Dragon coming is, like, the most, like theory that's been dropping in Egghead Island, but for some reason I think Dragon has to come with the whole revolutionary ties, of course. Now people are saying, wait, he's waiting for the God Knights and Figure and Garling before he even deals with the Gorosei or Imu. But at the end of the day, I'm a big Dragon fan, so I wouldn't be surprised if he comes, because the whole like, they set it up in the beginning when Vegapunk talking to Dragon saying I'm about to die, and Vegapunk's message, like, Vegapunk's message is actually more important than the Gorosei pulling up. I'm telling you guys right now. Like, we see in the background as the Gorosei pull up and the merger was the room is empty. That message is more important. It's giving me, I'll tell you guys right now, for some reason, Oda with this final saga is giving me, like, the apocalypse, the end of the world vibe. Like, seeing a horseman running around and killing people. Like, everyone knows the legends of how, like, the apocalypse and the horsemen and the 4 horsemen and whatnot. So definitely gotta say that I see the vibe that Oda's going with this in Egghead Island. It's funny because we still have Elbaf and the final war arc and Laugh Tale. Like, we have so many arcs after Egghead Island, and it feels like Oda is, like, kind of like fast forwarding, but there's still so much that we have to get to. We haven't even touched Blackbeard and Shanks. So seeing even moments of, like, having Blackbeard having appearance with Van Arger and Katarina Devon, like, there's so much that Oda has left, guys. Don't panic because we're seeing Luffy versus the Gorosei right now. We all know that Luffy has Blackbeard and Imu at kind of, like, there's so many places he can go when it comes to final villains, guys. So don't panic as fans, guys. Don't panic. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think the Elders are disappointment. I know a lot of people are looking at Saturn getting punched by Kuma, or Saturn pretty much getting copied, his power copied by Katarina Devon, and then Von Arger teleporting, or Luffy, like, doing that crazy Gatling in his Gear 5th form. Like, a lot of people are looking at different things, like Saturn blocking attack. At the end of the day, Saturn has recovery, so that affects how he fights. Like, and the fact that if that affects how he fights, and Lucci in this chapter kind of made me, like, give a little more respect to the Gorosei because of the whole Haki statement. Like, Kaido said it best at the end of Wano: Haki reigns supreme. They already have overpowered Delphin ability, so if they have immense Haki, how can you hate on the Gorosei when it comes to their powers and ability? We've seen it. Itsumade. Now, let's be honest here. You know what's funny? Out of all the Gorosei's Delphin abilities, like Saturn with the whole devil theme, Ox Demon is cool. Like Mercury with the whole like the boar, like that reminds me of Kuzugyodon that cut that boar in Wano. And then, of course, there's also the skeleton horse, which is awesome, and of course the Sandworm. But Itsumade, this flying creature, this flying bird, for some reason this character, it might be the most hype, even though I think it's in one of the least impactful Gorosei when it comes to Mars. I think this Gorosei has one of the coolest designs when it comes to Mythical Zoans. The fact that it's flying up in the air and Sanji's looking up and like, what the hell? There's a monster flying in the air. And the fact that it literally crashed into the Labo phase barrier. Yes, they didn't break it, but it's trying to get to the Labo phase barrier. Like, that means it's trying to get the weaker Straw Hat Pirates. And of course, that to me was menacing. I won't lie. That big bird was menacing. The Itsumade, it was very menacing. Now, I do want to say this. The Sandworm. The Sandworm was funny because we all know Luffy loves insects and bugs. So Luffy mentioned there's a worm. And then, of course, it eating Luffy. Reminded me of Skypiea when Luffy got eaten there as well. But then Dorian Broggy came out of nowhere, jump in and cut the Sandworm. Now, is the Sandworm Jupiter, the one who looks like Sanji, the Gorosei, is he dead? No, he's not dead, obviously. We've seen Saturn with the recovery. It's most likely that he's going to have recovery as well. But a lot of people look at it as like, okay, Oda doing this to Sandworm. Is Sandworm not a legitimate Gorosei? So I thought I would get these two out the way. I think Itsumade's looks super cool. That flying bird looks super cool. The Sandworm is funny, but I'll tell you guys right now, the Sandworm, does look like a little bit fodder. I will say this. I could be surprised, but like, come on, like, how you gonna throw hands when you have no hands, guys? You gotta keep it real. Now, I do want to say this: Nusjuro of the Gorosei showcase in this chapter was number one. The reason why I say this is, first of all, he's speed blitzing, guys. Like, take a second. Let's have a moment of silence for that. Okay, I'm back. Yes, he's speed blitzing in his hybrid form. He has a sword with hockey on it. It's black. I don't think it's a black blade because we've seen the sword earlier, like during pre-time skip and stuff, and it wasn't black. So the fact that it's black now obviously means it's armored hockey. So he has hockey on his sword. He's speed blitzing half of the pacifistas on the island already, freezing their brain circuits, taking them out. This guy is a hybrid combination of Zoro, Brook, and Kaido. Like, the reason I say Kaido is because the mythical zone aspect of it. And I'll tell you guys right now, Nusjuro looks to be one of the strongest swordsmen. It kind of reminds me of, like, think about this. Fujitora is a powerful swordsman with Adulthood ability. Same with Law. But let's be honest here. We know there's powerful swordsmen like Odin and Mihawk and Shanks and those guys and Zoro that have no Adulthood ability. Nusjuro looks a combination of a Delpher user and a swordsman user, and that's why he's so menacing and scary in this chapter. And Oda highlights him multiple times doing attacks, and Zoro just coming off of Wano, and him having a Wano name in Nusjuro. I personally, as a fan, after Zoro just mid-diffed, I'll talk about that a little bit later, guys. After Zoro just mid-diff Lucci, I want Zoro versus Nusjuro a little bit on this arc. I don't want all of it, but I want a little bit. And I think that'd be very, very cool if we saw it again in the final saga. Because Luffy versus Imu looks to be imminent. Joy Boy versus Imu from the Void Century. So to see Zoro versus Nusjuro and Wano talk and swordsmanship talk and Ryuma talk, that could happen, guys. Because Ryuma's a Wano person and Nusjuro from the Void Century is Wano. I think that would be super awesome, honestly. Now, I do want to talk about two things, guys. Yes, two things. Mercury didn't do nothing in this chapter. It just showcased no power and ability. Now, I think Mercury, the bald Gorosei, yes, with the burn mark, he, to me, always gave off the leader of the Gorosei. So the fact that he didn't do anything in this chapter was cool. Like, it was cool. Now, Nusjuro did the most in this chapter, so he can still be a prominent Gorosei, but Mercury not doing nothing was super cool. I have to admit, I won't lie to you guys, it was super cool to see. Now, I do want to say this. Saturn in this chapter as well did nothing, but we've seen Saturn do so much in Egghead Island that it's not necessarily like a hint of Saturn being a prominent Gorosei. Though I do think, I've always had a theory of Saturn being the strongest. I'm not surprised that Mercury and Saturn didn't do nothing. These two are probably, one of these guys are going to be the leader of the Gorosei. Like, as a fan, as the series, I wouldn't be surprised if Nusjuro, Mercury, and Saturn, yes, they're the three strongest, but I wouldn't be surprised if none of them are actually leaders of the Gorosei because they're part of an organization, and the actual leader, of course, would be Imu. Now, this kind of reminds me of Doflamingo's crew because the Gorosei and Doflamingo's crew have always had ties because Doflamingo being a celestial dragon. Remember that scene of them bowing down to Imu, and then, of course, the card seats that were bowing down to Doflamingo as youngins. Now, you have to understand, Virgo and Pika, they were the strongest, but there wasn't a significant vice captain to Doflamingo. Doflamingo wanted a lot to be the vice captain, but you have to understand, there wasn't a significant vice captain to Doflamingo. There was just Pika and Dressrosa and Virgo and Punk Hazard. And then, of course, we had, Diamante, who was also very prominent. Corazon, you can also mention him as well. But all I'm saying this is to say, in Trebol too as well. Trebol, if anything, Trebol could have been the vice captain because he survived the longest and fought Law. And, of course, was one who actually nurtured Doflamingo into the monster he is today. So, definitely want to say there's a lot of Doflamingo ties to this. So, there might not be no leader. Like Nusjuro, Mercury, and Saturn, all three of them could be a significant Gorosei member just in different ways. So, that's my thoughts on the whole Gorosei and showcasing power. And I thought it was very cool in this chapter. This chapter was a really Gorosei-orientated chapter, guys.